Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 306, Impacting the World Through the Greenprint with Marco Borges.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk with Marco Borges and we talk about the impact that he's had on the world. Really, he started off in med school and then changed directions, and he ended up creating the 22 Days Nutrition, and also he wrote an amazing book, The Greenprint, Plant-Based Diet, Best Body, Better World. But what he might be known for the most is the fact that he's worked with Beyoncé and may even be responsible or partially responsible for her becoming vegan. If you've ever thought of the word selfish and really thought about it in a negative connotation, I think that listening to today's podcast is really going to change your view. So I'm excited for you to hear that as well. And of course, at the end, we did talk about raising plant-based or vegan children and how it's affected both of our families in mainstream society today.
This was a really amazing episode for me to edit. There were so many great little pieces and nuggets of information that we're going to try to share with you throughout the week. But you really want to listen to this whole thing. And for those of you that don't know Marco, he's an exercise physiologist, and he's the founder of 22 Days Nutrition. He's a New York Times bestselling author and an advocate for the plant-based lifestyle. He's super passionate and is working really hard to guide people to develop healthier lifestyles. He spent the last 20 years as a lifestyle coach, and he's empowering others with tools that help them achieve ultimate wellness. One of the best parts of living north is when it finally becomes warm enough to get outside for a run wearing just a t-shirt again. The crisp, cool air helps wick away the sweat while we run, bike, or work out in our Propelled by Plants performance t-shirts printed on the exact same Ironman finisher microfiber material. It's fast absorbing, quick drying, most importantly, UPF 30+. You can also find us showing off our guns in our Training for Life cotton tees. So now's the time to get your own shirt. And since Father's Day is quickly approaching, plan ahead and order one for a father in your life too. Each t-shirt comes with a handwritten note from us because we believe that much in gratitude. And we love you, our listeners. So get your shirts at planttrainers.com/shop or click the link in the show notes. And now for a moment of gratitude.
I'm grateful for learning and I'm grateful for sharing. I have acquired a lot of tools under my tool belt between fitness, nutrition, supplements, healthy lifestyle that I have been able to implement into my own life, but also help others with. And when I'm told by somebody that a suspicious cyst that they've had on their liver for 10 years has gone away and they spent over 5 minutes looking for that on the scans with the doctor, then to me, that's just amazing that I'm able to help people to make changes in their life that end up having amazing health benefits for them.
I'm grateful for this time of year. I mean, it's been a long winter, it's been cold, and now's when the sun comes out a little bit more. We get to spend more time outside, and I just love being outside.
Marco Borges, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to hear your moment of gratitude.
Well, I think gratitude always starts with health, right? We're so lucky, so fortunate to have health. Because I truly believe that health is happiness. So I'm grateful for having the health that we have, not just me, but my family, my wife, my children, our parents, our siblings, and our friends.
I think health is one of the first things that we do when we pray for other people, whether we're praying from a religious point of view or just sending out the waves into the universe or sending those warm, healing thoughts to other people. You know, we don't necessarily pray for people to win the lottery or get the vacation that they want. I mean, we pray for other people's health because we know it's the foundation of everything else that comes in life.
Yeah, without it, nothing is possible.
So you're very passionate, and we've watched some of your interviews and heard you speak before, and we've realized that You're really working hard to help people get healthier and change their lifestyles to become healthier people. Where did that passion that you have really start from?
That really started at a very, very young age. I realized that some of the people that I love the most struggled with their health, starting with my grandmother, which is the first person that I could remember, thinking, God, if I could only become a doctor, I could probably cure her and help her get much better. Little did I know back then that her lifestyle was really causing her lack of health or her conditions that she was suffering from. And at a very young age, I realized that it was super important to be conscious about how you live your life, because we have, it's one of those things that we have. It's one of the areas in our lives where we have the most autonomy, yet we practice the least of it.
I'm just thinking, you use the word become a doctor to cure people. And I think, kind of with the exception of strep throats, ear infection, some cancers, most doctors are not actually trained to cure. They're traditionally trained to deal with the issue, to manage the issue. And as young children, when we think about doctors, we absolutely think that their responsibility is to cure us. And of course, there's amazing doctors today who are curing people, but in the traditional sense, it's not really cure. So I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, and that was the 6-year-old version of me, right? So you fast forward from 6 to 18, and I was obsessed with, I really became obsessed with human performance, health, behavior. And I was studying everything from behavior to nutrition to exercise. And I decided that I would pursue a degree in biology as my pre-med rec. And while I was doing my pre-med work, I realized while sitting in one too many surgeries that I wanted to watch in on, and I realized that we're trained really as healthcare professionals, or I should say, healthcare professionals are trained to treat symptoms and not really the underlying causes. And I realized that was it would be a terrible way for me to live because I'm a very proactive person, and that is a very reactive approach towards wellness. And I didn't want to be part of that. So I decided that I would do something different. And in doing that something different, I found my passion for not just wellness and nutrition, but really more specifically plant-based living and helping people elevate their consciousness, if you will, around what they're putting into their body. Because once you do that, I think everything else becomes pretty effortless. As humans, we tend to live by our habits, and we're really but a collection of our daily habits. So if we can get people to think a little bit differently, and we can help them rewire their habits, their behavior on a daily basis, then the outcome changes. And I always say that if you want to change the outcome, you have to change the process. But in order to change the process, you have to be able to rewire your habits. And no better way to rewire your habits than by practicing deliberate, continuous, sustained change over time.
Consistency is definitely there, and your why needs to be there, and you need to do it on a daily, on the daily grind. Did you make it to day one of pre-med? How long were you in school?
So I graduated with my degree in biology, but then I realized that I would probably be either miserable or I'd be thrown out of any medical establishment, because I'd be spending 7 hours with each patient telling them how they could change their lifestyle. So I decided to pick up a degree in exercise physiology, and then I started practicing if you look at an exercise physiologist, they typically work within a hospital setting, probably in a cardiac rehab unit, helping people who have just had a heart attack. I didn't want to do that, but I wanted to arm myself with the right tools so that I can help people live healthier lives. And I did that by becoming a trainer. And I became a trainer here in Miami, opened my first gym at the age of 22. And then, the rest is history. I've spent my career helping people live healthier, happier lives.
If I could go back for 1 minute, what was your parents' reaction, or what was that conversation like when you said, I don't want to be a doctor, I want to be a personal trainer?
Yeah, well, my mom my mom, so my parents were divorced when I was really young. I was just a couple of months old. My mom was pregnant with me when my parents got separated. So my mom was always that person that I went to share the news with first. And I remember telling my mom that I had an idea for something that I wanted to do differently. And her immediate reaction was, "You're nuts." But then very quickly, I mean, she knew me my whole life, obviously, so she knows that I'm wired differently. And she realized that my why was more important than the how or the money attached to whatever perceived profession we deem to be like most rewarding, right? So very quickly she realized, look, this is what he does, this is who he is, this is what he's passionate about. I'm sure that if he's passionate about it, he'll find his way. So she definitely wasn't kicking me out of the house for my choice, but she also wasn't cheering on the fact that I was foregoing medical school to become a trainer.
And so you became a trainer and you started helping out some pretty famous people like Beyoncé and helping people transform their lives into a healthier version of themselves, which inspired you to get into this book that you wrote, which is the Greenprint. And it's creating a movement that's really inspiring people to move more towards plants. And for our audience that's not familiar with the Greenprint, maybe you can clarify and explain a little bit about it for them.
Absolutely. Well, if I could take a step back, as I think that if someone's at home listening and they hear that I decided not to become a doctor and I became a trainer and then I started working with Beyoncé, they'd be like, oh, I get it. It definitely wasn't a linear path, right? As you can probably, very well understand. I decided to become a trainer and then I started working with people one-on-one, and then I opened my first gym, and very quickly people realized this is what I was born to do because I was incredibly passionate about what I was doing. And in doing my work the way that I did it or the way that I do it, people realized that it wasn't just an ordinary session or it wasn't just an ordinary trainer that they were working with. It was something that was really extraordinary in that my heart was in the right place to help them get to where they wanted to get. And it wasn't just about, training someone for an hour and, charging them a certain amount of money and walking away. It really was about understanding their lifestyle goals and, combining that with what I thought would be best for them. Because a lot of times people will tell you, oh, I want a six-pack. But they probably have, terrible cholesterol and hypertension and a host of other issues that they probably need to address before they get that six-pack, right? So it was a combination of me working, understanding what it was that they were looking for, combined with what I, knew would be best for them in the long term. And doing that and doing it well, I think, because I was so incredibly passionate, allowed me to kind of evolve into athletes, and then from the athletes into entertainers, and I've been blessed in many ways because yes, I've worked really hard, but at the same time, really amazing people have come into my life that I today consider very close friends, actually more like family than anything. So yes, it has been an absolutely unbelievable experience. And it all started with my why, and it really evolved. It has evolved over time because I realized that whenever I would start a conversation with someone about what they should be moving towards, it was always the response was almost always the same, and it was like, oh yeah, I have to go plant-based, but that's so tough, it's so difficult. I know that you are plant-based or that you are vegan and that, your family is as well, but that's impossible for me. And so I decided that I really wanted to change that narrative, because what happens when people believe in their minds that they're not allowed into a party because they are not 100% plant-based or 100% vegan is that they dismiss the notion altogether, and they never allow themselves to experience the wonderful benefits that is, a plant-based diet or a partial plant-based diet. So there really was something there that I thought needed to be addressed, in that, it's not about all or none. It's not about vegans versus non-vegans. It's not black or white. It's, a bunch of beautiful shades of different colors. The more we lean towards plants, the more we are going to benefit, the more the animals are going to benefit, the more the planet is going to benefit. So it's all in the lean. And that was and is the Greenprint. That was really the catalyst to sparking that idea, to developing the Greenprint. And it's what has, driven me my entire career. It's not about perfection. It's about progression. It's about getting people to understand that you're not perfect and it's okay. Neither am I, nor is anyone else, right? It's about making mistakes on a daily basis, learning from them, and moving in the right direction. Every day is a new opportunity to live the life, to rewire the habits, to love more, to be more compassionate, to be more caring, to be more conscious. And that really, in a nutshell, is what the Greenprint is all about. It's getting people to understand that the more they choose a plant-based diet, the more plant-based meals they choose, the more vegetables, beans, legumes, fruits, nuts, seeds they choose, the healthier they're going to be, the healthier their family's going to be by extension, the healthier our communities become, and the healthier the planet eventually will be, right? So it's really about getting people to become a little bit more conscious about what they're putting into their body, where that food is coming from, how it's grown, and ultimately how it affects you. Because if I can get people to be incredibly selfish and think about one thing and one thing only, and that would be themselves, then you come back to the same exact place, right? If you are only thinking of you, what is absolutely best for you, that is also best for the planet, and it's also best for the animals. And it's a beautiful, I think it's a really beautiful thing that it seems like it's coincidental, but it's really not, right? It's by design. What's good for us is also good for the planet. And that's really, in a nutshell, what I want people to understand, what I want people to take away. It's not about being perfect. It's about eating more plant-based meals. It's about empowering yourself with the ability to be as healthy as you want to be, and at the same time, using your pocketbook on a daily basis to vote for the world that you want to live in, using your meal choices to create the world that you want to see around you.
So Marco, did you always think of it this way? Was that always your philosophy? Because I know 20 plus years ago when I did my first personal trainer certification, when we talked about nutrition, the emphasis was on animal protein, animal products, and I didn't start out this way. So when did that click in for you?
I would say about 13, 14 years ago, I had an aha moment. But to be really honest with you, I was never a lover of meat. I had family members that hunted, and I never understood how someone could consider that a sport. I would always joke, you hide in a tree and you shoot a defenseless animal. That to me is not a sport. That just doesn't make any sense. That's like I would hide in a tree and jump out of the tree and hit you in the back of the head with a bat. I mean, there's nothing sporty about that. So I always had these feelings about compassion. I remember as a kid going fishing with my family and always praying that I would never catch anything. I actually never caught anything. And it was, not on a regular basis, but if I went with like an old, like my mom's uncle, or my grandmother on my mom's side had a very large family. There were 12 of them, 12 siblings. So there's a lot of extended uncles and aunts. And I remember that at a very young age, I always loved animals. I never wanted to see cruelty. By the way, I've never been the kind of person that was ever into cruelty at all, not towards animals, not towards other people. I couldn't stand to see other kids being made fun of in school. I would never be a part of that. I'd stop people. So there was something there underlying, but I never knew what it was. And then about, I don't know, like I said, 13, 14 years ago, I just had an aha moment where I was like, man, I do all this research and it all points in the same direction. If we want to be optimally healthy, we have to move towards a plant-based diet. I mean, Dr. Dean Ornish has figured this out. Dr. Esselstyn's figured it out. Dr. Barnard's figured it out. Why am I not doing this? I keep reading it and I'm acting like it's what everyone else should be doing, but perhaps not me because I'm not, sick or I'm not unhealthy. And I just thought, it would be hypocritical for me to promote a lifestyle that I'm not living. So before I start promoting it, I have to start living it. And I was already eating super clean, and as I mentioned earlier, I've been really obsessed with human performance. I grew up an athlete, right? So it was never a matter of me being overweight or trying to get in shape. It was a fact that I had that moment where I was like, you know what? We are not our genes. Our genes are not our destiny. And, just because my grandmother and her mother's mother had heart disease and diabetes and, all the other issues that they dealt with, doesn't mean that the disease is hereditary. It means that we're affected by the same habits. The habits are what is hereditary. And if I continue to live the same way, I probably too will wind up in the same place. If I want to do something different, I got to change the process, right? If I want to change the outcome, I have to change the process. So I did. I immediately changed the process, and day one, people ask me, I love your mindset and how you approach this whole plant-based lifestyle. So you kind of you eat fish sometimes, and you drink milk sometimes, and you eat cheese sometimes. Is that how you typically roll with it? I'm like, no, I am obsessed with my dietary intake. I am obsessed with what I put into my body and where it comes from and how it's grown, and I choose to live that way. I don't judge others for not living the same way, but I don't eat any animal products. I am as hardcore as you can imagine on a plant-based diet, and I do the same for my kids. All 4 of my kids have been born and raised in the plant-based diet. My wife is also plant-based, and we don't bring anything into the home that isn't plant-based. It doesn't matter if we're entertaining or not. It just doesn't happen. If I'm going to entertain my friends, it's probably because if I have people over in my home, it's probably because I love them, because I don't have strangers over the house. And if I love the people that I'm going to be entertaining, that I want to make sure that they have the best nutrition. So even when I do that for people that aren't plant-based, I will always serve plant-based options. But that said, it doesn't mean that it's about perfection, right? For me, I choose to live a certain way, but I don't think that everyone has to start the same way. I don't think that everyone's path is exactly the same. I know everyone's path is different. Everyone's journey is going to look different. But at the end of the day, if I can get people to become more conscious about, again, what they're putting into their body, where it's coming from, and how it's going to affect them and the planet, then I think that we've done our job.
I find that so interesting, that whole story. You had a message to bring to the masses, and you realized that you need to be taking part in that before you started getting that message out, where we were kind of the opposite, where we were in that, Adam was 35, heart disease, tumor, and he found a plant-based diet. After 1 year, the tumor shrunk, the heart disease went away. And then we were like, wow, we're living it. And how do we send that message out there to make sure that other people don't get sick when they don't have to? How can they prevent all of this? If they are sick already, how can they reverse it the way that they did? So, we were kind of coming at it at 2 different angles. The whole catalyst for this podcast was to get our message out that we had found accidentally where in terms of our lifestyle. So it was a little bit of the opposite for you, which I find really noble, because you didn't have a reason, you didn't have a life or death reason to make it happen. And that's what we're trying to get that message out to other people. Make this change before you have to, because it just, the way it affects other people and the way it affects you continuously is really more than people can understand.
There's so much more great information coming your way, but before we get to that, we wanted to share with you our 3 biggest complaints that we have about cookbooks. 1, sometimes we just don't know where to get the ingredients. 2, sometimes we buy an ingredient and use so little of it and have so much left over. What a waste of money and waste of a resource. And 3, if there's no picture, we're not making it. We need to be able to visualize things and see what it's going to look like when it's done so that we could do our best with it. And a bonus complaint is that we're busy parents with jobs who exercise and we just don't have time for the fancy stuff. That's why we created the Easy Recipes for Busy Parents e-cookbook. You don't need to be busy and you don't need to be parents, but we promise you'll find all the ingredients in no time. The same ingredients get used over and over again, so there's no waste. There are pictures for every recipe, and it'll be easy. If that's good enough for you, check out the link in the show notes or go to planttrainers.com/shop and get your cookbook today. And now back to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I wish that I could say that I did it without having a reason. The reality is I probably was playing chess when most other people are playing checkers, if that makes sense. And that most of the time people are thinking their next move, and I was thinking 5 moves away, in that I realized that the disease was there. It hadn't manifested itself yet in my body, but it was apparent in everyone else's body around me. I wasn't going to wait to see that happen, right? So I knew it was coming, and if I continued to live the same way, I too probably would be suffering from some health conditions, right? I didn't want to wait that long. So, I wish I could say that I started, simply because I just wanted to, but the reality is that I was being super selfish. I was saying, hey, I see this and I don't want any part of it. I mean, this is not living. This is not life. Waking up to take dozens of pills on a daily basis, not being able to live my best life. I can't imagine living that way. I can't imagine, waking up and not jumping out of my bed with excitement to live another awesome day. I could not envision myself not living that way. So I changed very, very quickly, knowing that my future self would be thanking me for it. And again, sometimes people, I meet people that are like, I'm the right weight. I feel great. I'm an athlete. I work out. I do CrossFit. I do triathlons, whatever their method of training is. And I feel awesome. And, I'm on paleo, or I'm on keto, or I'm on whatever they're on. I'm like, it's really not about that. It's about a bigger picture. It's about your, future self. It's about your kids. It's about your family. It's about our communities. It's about the planet. It's about the animals. There's a lot more of it. And it just makes sense. And I think that if you can get people to understand why, everything becomes effortless, right? If you get people to really understand why it's so important, why it's so meaningful, why it's so necessary, why the time is now, then it's easy for people to transition. And again, it's not being judgmental about it. It's allowing people to do it in the way that makes most sense for them. And I've had this conversation with so many friends where they're like, man, but you have such an amazing platform and you've built this whole, why did you? And I'm like, well, imagine being invited, right? Imagine being a hardcore, plant-based advocate or vegan, and inviting people to come into this awesome, super cool lifestyle. And you have this humongous party. And the minute they walk up the door to come inside the party, you stop them and you're like, oh, you can't come in. You're wearing a leather belt. Oops, you got a wristband on your watch that's made out of leather. Oh, by the way, you've got a little fur on your neck. Oh, you know what? You just no one is going to want to join you. When it becomes so preachy and it becomes so judgmental and it becomes anger, the walls go up. It's impossible to have a conversation. It's impossible to have a constructive conversation. So I think that it starts with kindness, it starts with love, and it starts with compassion, because that's exactly what we're trying to promote. Love, kindness, compassion. And if you truly are going to do that, then you have to practice it yourself, right? You have to tell people, man, it's not about perfection. It really isn't. It's about just understanding what you are doing to yourself, what you're doing to the planet, and what you're doing to the animals. And whatever makes sense for you, 1 meal a week, fantastic. One day a week, amazing. 100% all in, awesome. I'm going to treat you all exactly the same, with love, with respect, with admiration, because we're all human.
I think that's a really important message, because there are the typical, what you see in like cartoons, the angry vegans out there. But I think that you can't truly call yourself vegan if you're not practicing kindness to other humans. So your point is right on 100%.
Thank you.
So for some people, they'll say, some people will say, I'll get there when I need to, right? I'll do it when I need to, or it's in my genes, so it's inevitable. But then we do get people who start to listen, who start to see, who start to say, well, maybe I don't have to, or maybe I could do it more. I think selfish is definitely a positive word in this case, because you've used the word selfish a lot. But if we are selfish and we do it despite our children's, gymnastics 8 times a week, or hockey 3 times a week, or despite, our spouse being angry with us, if we do those things selfishly, then what we're really doing is we're educating other people. We're spreading the message. We're making ourselves healthier and setting an example. And, if it's selfish to take away cheese or pizza or cupcakes from our children, and we can get cheese or cupcakes or pizza that are plant-based too, but if we take those typical things away and we're so selfish to our children, but look at what we're giving them. We're giving them that health. We're giving them that education. We're giving them that attitude, that positivity. So I think that the word selfish doesn't always have to be a negative word. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, absolutely. And that's how I use it, right? So I am incredibly optimistic. I am an incredibly happy person. And I'm just really positive about how I use all of my words. For me, selfish is the greatest act of self-love, right? Because in being selfish, you become your best, at least for me, right? I love to see things in a very, very positive light. In being selfish, you become your best self. And it's only when you are your best self that you can give the best of yourself to the people you love most. And being a great example to your children by being selfish is a wonderful thing. It's almost like that message in the airplanes, right? Put your mask on first. If you don't put your mask on first, what could happen is that in trying to fiddle with someone else's mask, you pass out because you don't have enough oxygen, and now 2 people are in peril, or maybe more, right? So it's about taking care of yourself in the best possible way so that you can help others around you, right? And here, I'm going to give you a perfect example. I decided to go 100% plant-based because I did not want to suffer from heart disease or diabetes like everyone in my family. My grandfather died at the age of 96, I believe, and he lived a super long life, but he didn't live a great life. In that last, 20, 30 years of his life, he was almost blind because of his diabetes. He used to love to play cards with his friends. He got to the point where he couldn't play cards anymore. So, when you think about it, you're like, oh my God, we've got terrible genes. Actually, no, we've got really amazing genes. He lived to be 96 in spite of his lack of, fitness, his lack of nutrition, his lack of, managing his stress, and all the other things that we could go down the list on, right? So it wasn't that he wasn't, healthy on a genetic level. It was that everything that he was doing on the outside, the epigenetics, was playing such an important role, or such a detrimental role in his health, that it wound up really robbing him of his life. My grandmother, the same thing. I remember being a kid. I was 6 years old, saying, I'm going to cure her. When I sat to write the Greenprint, I started doing the math. My grandmother was in her 40s, taking medication for the rest of her life, right? So when you think about it, I decided that I would go 100% plant-based because I was being selfish. I was like, I definitely don't want any part of that. But then guess what happened? My wife went 100% plant-based. We had a couple of years after that, maybe 3 years after, we had our first son. Then we had our second son. Then we had our third son. Then we had Mila, our beautiful princess. They're all born and raised in a plant-based diet. My mom, who suffered from hypertension almost her entire life, decided to go 100% plant-based. My brother went 100% plant-based. My sister went 100% plant-based. She's raising her kids. So it took me being incredibly selfish to allow my family to benefit from my selfishness.
How's grandma now?
My grandmother passed away almost 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And she had a series of strokes that did her in. And she wasn't in great condition. But again, when you look back, she had literally a cocktail of drugs that she was prescribed, that she was taking from the time I was born through my, I would say, probably, late 30s, which is insane. Yeah. Insane, yeah. Right? That she lived that long in spite of all of those drugs. So, at the end of the day, my message is always allow your body to live its best, to be its best, to be as magical as it can be, but don't get in the way of it, right? You can't take your health for granted. We shouldn't be taking our health for granted. We shouldn't be just saying, well, I know a lot of times people will say like, oh, it's just so complicated, whatever. I've got to die of something. You are definitely going to die, but you don't have to die at a young age, and you most certainly don't have to die very slowly for a very long time, which is what a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world are doing today. They're dying a super slow, painful death, full of drugs and medications for many, many, many years, and that is not living. And a lot of times what happens is that they're taking these drugs for so long that they forget what it truly is like to live, to wake up in the morning and say, oh my God, I get to do this one more time. Like to live with passion, to feel great, to have energy, to be full of zest every single day of the week. That is a gift that I don't take lightly and that I don't think anyone else should either.
Thank you so much for being so open about your family and the personal background. Once we're talking about family a little, a lot of our audience has kids, has young kids, and you mentioned that yours grew up plant-based from the beginning. Wondering if you could share any challenges that your kids may have as they've been growing up and being plant-based with their friends or school or any social situations that may have come up.
I get that question a lot, and I think it's natural for most people to start to wonder, how do you deal with the pressures? But for me, it's really like I can't help but to think we're only inquisitive as it relates to a plant-based diet, right? Like if someone is living very responsibly and putting away money. They have a 401k or they have a retirement account. They don't spend more than they should. They're conservative in their spending habits. They're kind and thoughtful and great, and all the amazing things they can do and be and provide for their family. We never ever question that. We never say, well, don't you find it hard to save money having, children? But the minute you tell someone your kids are plant-based, it's like, oh my God, how are you doing it? It must be impossible. The reality is, I'm giving my kids the greatest opportunity to live a super healthy, long, beautiful life. And we do so without any apologies, right? We're not apologetic about it. For me, it's really about understanding that heart disease is still the number one killer. It probably will be, surpassed by cancer very, very, very shortly. And it's not because heart disease is slowing down, but only because more and more people are getting cancer. Diabetes is absolutely out of control. Obesity is, it's a global epidemic. It's a disease. And when you look at a plant-based diet, it's the only diet in the world that has been effectively proven to not just prevent and arrest, but also to reverse heart disease, to, mitigate risk factors, reduce risk factors for diabetes, reduce risk factors for dementia, cancer, Alzheimer's. And the list goes on and on. Yet you get questioned when you choose to have your kids live a healthy lifestyle that prevents all of these things. So for me, it's really not about worrying so much about others. It's about making sure that I'm empowering and arming my kids with the right tools so they can continue to do this on their own long after they've left our home and gone off to college and started to live their own lives and start their own family. Really, it's about teaching them. It's about empowering them. It's about teaching them through my actions and letting them understand how important it is to be in control of your health and not give that, agency over your health to others, as most often do, unfortunately. So for us, it hasn't been a challenge. I'd love to tell you that, I can't say that I'd love to tell you, but I wish I could tell you otherwise. But the reality is that it hasn't been a challenge because we know we're living our best lives and we're helping them live their best lives as well. So it's simple. They're homeschooled now. They were in regular school before, but we could go down this rabbit hole. But I didn't love the way that school was set up. I still don't. I realized that a lot of the things that we hope and expect our kids to learn, they're really not learning. And, a lot of it has to do with like nutrition. When you think about it, right? Like think about the behaviors, the habits that kids are going to develop over time at school that are going to enter adulthood with, right? One of them is eating because they have lunch at school on a daily basis. And the other one is, well, there's a few of them, but one of them is eating. The other one is socialization. The other one is physical fitness, right? So more and more schools are eliminating physical fitness, or it's not as important as it should be. And for me, that's a massive, a big opportunity for us to correct very, very quickly. It's not happening quick enough, so I decided to do something about it. Another one of them is what we're putting into our kids' systems through nutrition, through their lunch program. And that is, really, for me, it's unacceptable. And you could argue that you could give your kids lunch to take to school, but then I would also argue, how am I part of a system that I know is not providing the absolute best for all the other kids, or the only kids that matter mine? Really, it shouldn't be that way. I've worked with schools to try to improve the school lunches, and I've worked with schools to try to improve the physical education program. And then the last one that I mentioned was, socialization. The reality is that you're supposed to, this is an environment where you're going to be around peers and kids your age, and you're supposed to be socializing. But the reality is you're really not supposed to socialize, because you can't talk in class. You have very little time between classes, if you have the luxury of changing classrooms. And then you go home with 4 or 5 hours of homework, because I guess schools think that it's cool, or that it shows that they're doing their job if they give your kids, 15 hours of homework, a week, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because then at what time do they really socialize, and at what time do they really get to work out or exercise or be part of some sort of a program that challenges their bodies as much as we're challenging their minds throughout the day. So we designed our own program, and our kids are being homeschooled now, but we're having the time of our lives with it. So I could go on and on about it, but that's it in a nutshell.
Sounds really fun. Maybe we'll send our kids for a field trip over to your house, in terms of our kids, people ask us that question too. And we never have, the challenge isn't within our four walls, or wherever the Chaim family is in this universe at that moment. The problems only come up when there's other individuals involved who are either unkind or ignorant and unwilling. It's some birthday parties they go to, and it's a non-issue. Other birthday parties, the parents text me till they're blue in the face, waiting for me to say, okay, I'll just send all the food for them. Some kids at school are kind and accepting of my kids' lunches, and then sometimes they're not. Our system works a little bit differently than yours, but the challenges are worth it. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And by the way, but the same could be said about, forget about lunch, the same could be said about a t-shirt your kids wear, or the haircut they have, or the length of their nails, or the shoes they have, or the socks, or their smile, or their teeth, or anything, right? Mm-hmm. And if you raise your kids, having them understand or believe some way, somehow, that what other people think about them should change who they are, or that they should bend, who they are to, satisfy whatever the norm is, and that, I don't think that's healthy, right? I don't think that's very healthy at all. So, I agree with you. Some people, for some people it's easier to deal with these things than others, but, they're all healthy challenges. I think they're all super healthy challenges, because if we're going to change the world, if we're going to do something, you have to learn how to stand for something, right? So it's in that learning how to stand for something, and learning that not everyone's going to be the same, and people are going to, sometimes make fun of the t-shirt you're wearing or the lunch that you're eating. And that's perfectly okay. And more often than not, they're either making fun of your t-shirt or your lunch because they wish they had it or they wore it. So I'm not too worried about that.
So you mentioned habits earlier. We talk a little bit about the Greenprint, and what we're trying to do is create healthier lifestyle choices. If somebody listening was listening to all this and saying, I really need to make a change, what's the first thing that you would recommend people to do if they don't want to tackle too many things at once?
Start with one meal. It's really, really simple. It boils down to one meal. So the way I like to position it is, if you ate one plant-based meal a day, just one, your lifestyle would improve by 33.3%. Right? You'd feel 33.3% better. Your, blood profile would improve by 33%. Your performance would improve by 33%. You would reduce you'd have an impact on your carbon footprint by reducing, greenhouse gases, water usage. All of that will greatly improve with just one meal a day. So one meal a day can have really profound effects on your health and on the planet. And all it takes is starting with one meal a day. It's really simple.
So what would be your one meal of choice for yourself?
I like breakfast because it's pretty easy. Most people have it at home. And what I've found over the years is that breakfast is that one meal a day where people don't mind eating the same exact thing over and over and over again, as long as they like it, because it becomes more of a routine than anything else. And it's easy to get really great, super simple, easy to make food at home for you and your family at that time of the day, right? So breakfast you can make the night before by making overnight oats, or you can have it prepared the morning of if you have more time. And it's simple. You can get really creative. It's very inexpensive, and you start your day off right. I think that a great day starts with a great breakfast, and I think that if you're going to try to make the improvement, there's no better way to start than by breaking your fast with something that's really meaningful.
I think that's so funny because people always say they don't want to eat the same thing for dinner every day, but they never realize that they're eating the same bowl of oats or the same bowl of cereal every morning for breakfast every single day of the week.
I've had the same smoothie for breakfast every single day for the last 4.5 weeks.
Right. Right. But it's just funny. I just think it's funny. So Marco, you've been on a lot of other podcasts and interviewed on TV and other media outlets. Is there a question that you've always wanted someone to ask you because you want to share it with your audience, but they never really get to it? I want to give you the opportunity to basically come up with that one thing that you want people to know about you that you never really get asked. Does it exist? Is there one?
There may be, but to be honest with you, I've never thought of that. For me, all of the podcasts, interviews, they're just conversations. I mean, that's the way I always look at them. I don't go into it with, a lot of times I think people think when they hear a podcast or when they see an interview on TV that everything is super rehearsed, or that you get a list of questions and then you kind of come up with whatever the answer is, or you have a boilerplate answer for whatever you're going to be asked. But the reality is that the best conversations or the best interviews are really in the form of a conversation that just go where they go. I've had conversations with people that were going to talk about one thing and we wind up talking for an hour about something else, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I love talking, and I love to talk to people, and I love to share my thoughts, and I love to hear other people's thoughts, because I think that that's how we all grow. I love to learn. I love to grow on a daily basis. I love to practice Kaizen, which is the Japanese word for continuous self-improvement. And every one of these conversations is an opportunity for Kaizen. So, I can't think of any one thing that I want to share with the world other than we are incredibly able, gifted, and powerful beings when we want to be. If we choose to live more compassionate, more thoughtful, kinder, more conscious lives, the world becomes an absolutely beautiful place everywhere you go. And I think that living in the time that we're living now, we can all use a little bit more of that.
Beautiful, beautiful sentiments. Marco, if somebody wants to learn more about you, about your program and what you do, where would you like them to reach out?
We can be found on Instagram at 22 Days Nutrition. Our website is 22daysnutrition.com, and on Twitter we're 22 Days Nutrition.
Perfect. We'd like to thank you so much for your time. We are going to link to all of those at the show notes at planttrainers.com. You have it all thought out. You're very open, honest, kind. We could feel it through this microphone, and we hope that our audience can as well. So thank you so much for your time and everything that you're doing for the animals, for people's health, and for the planet.
Ditto. Thank you both as well. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans. It really helps other people find us just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.